Hello, friends.
Hey, I want to try something different in this video, which is that I have typed out what I think I'm going to talk about, and so it's sort of like a script, and I'm just going to read from it, and it might feel a bit unnatural, but the pro is that I'm going to get through the material quite a bit faster. So experimental. Let me know how it feels. Let me know if it helps. If it doesn't help, I don't know. I'm trying stuff, right? Let's figure it out. So today's video is going to be about emotions and my journey with emotions and how I think about emotions and how I recommend thinking about emotions, what my background and history has been like. So starts with early childhood, right? Family. I would say that growing up, my family never really talked about emotions. You know, we didn't really ask each other, how are you feeling? But I wouldn't say that it was emotionless. I wouldn't say, it's like so my family ran their own business. I made a whole separate video about that. And I could feel, when my parents were frustrated, when they were worried about work, when they were anxious. And sometimes we'd have fun and, it'll be fun, right? So it's all of that stuff. And so, I also remember reading books. I remember enjoying reading books, having delight and pleasure, and joy, playing video games, eating fast food, getting to drink Coke, too much Coke at someone's birthday party, stuff like that. But even now, if you ask me, did you have an emotional childhood? Like, what does that mean? What there are connotations to that idea. So the instinctive answer, if you asked me that a few years ago, I think my answer would have been no. And now I would be like, well, it depends. What do you mean by emotional? Which we will get into. I grew up in 1990s Singapore, right? Which Singapore is often described as a place that is sterile by outsiders and even by some of us locally. And it's something that I've thought about a lot over the years, and I don't agree entirely with the assessment. I think the ways in which we express our emotions might be different. It might be more muted, but just because the expression of an emotion is muted doesn't mean that the experience of the emotion is muted, right? You don't necessarily need to be grand and dramatic in the ways you convey your feelings to have feelings, right? And I think this is something that is generally underappreciated about expressiveness, but I'll get into that separately maybe. When I was a teenager, when I was about 16 or so, me and my friends kind of got into MBTI theory together, and I remember being very excited about it. I was elated to learn that I was an ENTP, which is, so the MBTI framework, and it is a framework, it has like 16 types of people, right? So if previously you hadn't considered that there may be different kinds of people, the idea that, oh, there's multiple kinds of people, I found that to be eye-opening, right? And I have videos about this as well, where it's a new way of seeing, and every new way of seeing is kind of exciting because there's all this promise, but if you're not careful, it becomes a set of blinders, and it constrains the way you see things, and you try to fit things into the categories, when reality doesn't always, seldom does reality fit nicely into the categories that we would like things to be in, right? And so it can be a little bit too easy to look at MBTI in a binary way, and particularly I think the third variable. So I know ENTP. I know MBTI isn't that simplistic, but people do simplify it, right? And there's this temptation to split people into thinkers and feelers. And ENTP, T being thinking, I bought into the idea that I was a thinker and not a feeler, as if it's black and white, right? And which means that I'm not emotional. And then you start reinterpreting. When you have a new theory that you like, you start reinterpreting all the evidence and all the conflicts and whatever that you've been through before, and you start looking for ways to fit that theory. And I'm like, oh, all those arguments I've had with emotional people is because they are emotional and I'm the logical rational one, and I'm too logical and rational for to have a conversation with these emotional people, and I'm not. That's the source of our misunderstanding and tension. That's a pretty condescending frame, but when I was 17 it seemed like a very promising insight. I'll get more into this. And I also think, I definitely grew up in a world where there's this widespread idea that men are more logical and women are more emotional. And, that can be a very damaging oversimplification. There are so many assumptions baked into that. I'm not even going to be able to get into many of them in this video, but I'm just going to keep talking. I was anxious all the time as a teenager, and I was in denial about it. I was anxious about school, anxious about the future, anxious about what job am I going to do, am I going to have a career. I was anxious about when my girlfriend broke up with me. I was anxious about, was I ever going to find another partner, am I ever going to find meaning in life. I was anxious about all of those things. But if you had asked me, Visa, are you an anxious person? Do you experience anxiety? I would be like, no, of course not. I'm so chill, dude. I'm so cool. I'm the most happy-go-lucky person around. I don't have any, anxieties. Like anxieties are for, people who don't have their shit together. I'm cool. I'm chill. And I think that's a kind of false consciousness. And a false consciousness is a way of thinking that prevents a person from perceiving the true nature of the situation. It's denial, right? It's my refusal to accept that I might be an emotional person, because that would imply weakness on my part, and weakness is bad and shameful. That, ironically, it kept me trapped in a stasis. It kept me stuck in where I was. Because you need to be able to identify and face your issues before you can address them and grow through them. But as long as I was in denial about my anxiety, I would be suffering from the symptoms, right? I would be stressed, I would be lashing out sometimes, I would be beating myself up internally, and in denial about all of that. And so I can't fix the problem that I refuse to acknowledge, right? So that was that. Let's talk about logic and emotions, right? In the casual, colloquial sense, right? So first of all, there's a very technical definition used by philosophers and mathematicians and so on about logic, and how it's about analyzing the validity of arguments, prepositions, this, therefore, that. I don't really want to get into that. I think that I'm more interested in the casual definition of logic, which is what people mean when they say, can you be more logical, or don't be illogical, and so on. And to me, logic is like a system of measurements. It's like rulers, measuring tapes, weighing scales, spectrometers, thermometers, telescopes, microscopes, whatever. You use logic to figure out solutions to problems. You eliminate what doesn't work. You experiment with the framing. You eliminate what doesn't work. I already said that. You just kind of work your way systematically through things. That's logic for me, casually. And what does it mean to be emotional? Casually speaking, I think when somebody says he's being emotional, don't be emotional, why are you so emotional? They tend to mean something quite specific. They tend to mean that you're letting your emotions control your behavior. You're overreacting. You're being dramatic. You're kind of you're either angry or you're upset. You're full of feeling, and your feeling is making you you're not in control of your feelings. Your feelings have you, right? And there's something strange and funny about this, because very often what people want is that they want other people to behave in predictable and manageable ways that don't disrupt their lives. Like you being angry or upset or having a freak out or whatever is very inconvenient for me. I would prefer it if you would chill out. And that was, part of my motivation to come across as a chill guy. I didn't want to be responsible for making someone else feel like I was the burden, right? And so I did not, and at some level, I didn't trust my friends, especially my guy friends, I guess. I didn't trust my friends to be able to handle me being emotional. I did play in a band, and I was writing songs, and I did one of the good things about my life, and which I have a video about with the musician videos about that, is that when I saw bands doing what they were doing, expressing their feelings, writing songs about heartbreak and despair and stress and whatever, it's just that the blues, right? Like that to me was a way for men especially to be artful in their expression of their feelings. And so I always had that, and I guess it never occurred to me to try to put everything together and have like a coherent system of understanding emotions and feelings and expressions. So it was just I play in a band because that's cool, because that makes me hot, it's like girls are into me because I'm a rock star, that kind of thing. And but at the same time I was writing, so when I was writing songs I would be writing about, I had a song called Say Goodbye, and it's almost about my family. It's about leaving the nest in a sense, right? And leaving familiar ground to go somewhere new because your heart wants to explore. Like I would say those things in my songs. And then, if I'm having a conversation with someone after the show, and if they ask me like, wow, are those emotions coming from a deep place? I guess I would say, yeah, true. Yeah, I'm a very deep guy. But I would try to be chill about it. It's about which is, I would say there was some compartmentalization going on. It was a bit of a coping mechanism, but it was also a very good skill for me to develop. And I would say that playing in a band, which I made a whole video about, right? Playing in a band was a fantastic education for me at many levels, right? Anyway, let's continue. So, I think there's something strange and funny about the idea of trying to stop people from being overdramatic, because a very big part of what makes people overdramatic is they feel like they're not being heard, not being listened to. And whatever it is, there's something that's bothering them, something that's troubling them. It could be something they're hallucinating. Like, I'm not saying that people who have feelings are all hallucinating, but at some meta level, aren't we all hallucinating everything all the time because of our feelings, because of the ways our brains work? But no, that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to talk about how it could be that someone is taking an issue and overestimating the impact, because it's, there's a whole bunch of reasons why humans have, you have anxious feelings about something that isn't actually very stressful, but because of one thing implies something else implies something else. You might be catastrophizing, right? You might be catastrophizing, learned catastrophe making, right? Like you like one small thing goes wrong, and then in your head you imagine everything else going wrong, and then there's this whole meme that's like, you forgot your pencil, therefore you failed your test, therefore you failed the exam, therefore you got bad grades, therefore you got a bad job, therefore nobody wants to marry you, therefore you die sad, like that kind of thing. Like if a person is losing their pencil and they're freaking out, telling them, hey, don't be so emotional, don't freak out, that doesn't help them. That doesn't, I guess it's a numbers game, but the odds are not in your favor. There's a very, very small chance that it might work out maybe. But you're better off saying, hey, breathe, like tell me what's going on. Like help me understand why you're freaking out. Like there's a bunch of different intervention tactics for dealing with someone who's having a freak out of some kind. But none of them start by saying, condescend to the person about their feelings and kind of diminish and minimize what they're feeling. Because, I just don't recommend that. Anyway, so once you appreciate, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I do think that everybody, or almost everybody, has emotions, and there have been some rare cases where people who have certain neurological disorders or dysfunctions or brain damage, they have something compromised about their emotions. So if I remember correctly, there's this study where people with damage to a certain part of the prefrontal cortex, they struggle to express their feelings. And even more damning in a sense, or even more revealing, is that they have trouble making simple decisions. So they can, make a pros and cons list about what they're gonna do that day, or of making any decision, some simple decision. What should you have for lunch? Do you want a chicken sandwich or do you want a salad, right? And then you might be like, chicken has more protein and whatever, and they come up with all the reasons. But then they can't choose. And what that suggests to me, and I mean, if you know better, please enlighten me in the comments, because I'm not claiming to be an authority on this. I'm just a guy figuring stuff out. But what I get out of this is that decision making is fundamentally emotion driven, and we bring us back to the idea of logic being a weighing scale or a system of measurement. So even when you think something like, it's logical to take the higher paying job, right? If you have two job offers and they're basically the same but one pays more, you would think that it's better to take the high paying job. And what's implicit in that statement, everything else held constant, is that more money is better than less money. It's such a obvious statement that you might not even occur to think that that's what you're thinking, because it's blur. Duh. It's obvious. But there is an emotional component to that, which is that the idea that more money, the idea of more money is more exciting or more pleasure inducing than the idea of less money, right? And that could be either you have an emotional attachment to the number itself, or it could be, what does the number represent for you? Does it mean that your friends will respect you more, you'll get to buy more stuff, you get to be more comfortable, be less stressed? All of the things that you associate with having more money has, you can list those things out as like direct impact on life, quality of life kind of things. But even then, if you get into each quality of life thing, like why is better sleep better? Why is it good to be less stressed? Like each of those things, it's because you have some emotional, ultimately when you really investigate and dig and go all the way to the end, there's always some emotional association with the idea, right? With any action, any outcome, there's nothing is like emotion neutral. There's always something. It seems to me, right? Let me know if you disagree. I would love to hear it. So once you experience and you appreciate how much feelings and emotion are really central to everything in life, basically, it's only logical, right? It's only logical to try and appreciate them better, to face them and to try and understand them, right? Because again, like when people say phrases like "it's only logical," it's you get what I'm saying? It's like a sense of, here are all the options you have in front of you, and this is clearly the best option because of these outcomes are clearly superior, right? And they're clearly superior because blah blah blah, right? And if so much of life is emotional when you really investigate it, then it makes sense to understand it. It's only logical, right? So okay, here's my experience with journaling, right? Which was my entry point to making sense of all this stuff. If you keep a journal of your own actions and your behaviors, your frustrations, your disappointments, your surprises, things that bother you, I believe you'll find, or at least I found in my case, that there are all sorts of ways in which emotions almost secretly hijack the way things are going. There's this funny comic by Owl Third, Shen Comics, that shows a guy asking logic and emotion, like to choose for him something, like should I go with option A or option B? So he asks emotion, which do you like? And emotion says, oh, I like B. And then he asks logic, which should I go with? And then emotion is behind logic, holding a gun to his head, and logic stammers B. And I think it's such a funny and resonant comic, because if you think about it, if you examine your own life, you will almost definitely, I imagine you would almost definitely find examples in which you used the tools of logic to rationalize a decision that you had already made, or to avoid a decision that you didn't want to make. Like logic is tools. Logic is a toolkit. And it's very rare for people to, not have their paths, right? The paths that logic takes them, not have their paths shaped by things like anxieties, fears, desires. And there are books about this, right? The Elephant in the Brain, Thinking Fast and Slow. Like there are all these things that reveal that we are not as, and even saying we are not as rational as we think we are might not be the right frame. It could be that we are reasoning within certain premises, and within those premises, if those premises are true, then we are behaving rationally in that context. But it could be that that frame is not necessarily the correct frame for that situation. So it's complex, and you got to figure out what's the right thing to do in the right context, which is, again, it can take you years to figure out. You're never fully done figuring these things out, but you can make progress, and you feel better from making progress. Feelings, right? What's next? So one of the things that, one of the ideas I feel very strongly about recently is the idea of unlearning coercion, and I made a video about that. And coercion being a system of threats, bullying, scolding, shaming, and to try and get what you want, right? And I want to talk specifically here about self-coercion, which is when you say things to yourself like, you'd be such a terrible person if you don't do X. You got to make sure that you do these things, because otherwise, then you're a bad person, or otherwise nobody will like you, right? Or otherwise, things that so that's what's great about journaling, right? If you journal your thoughts, you then get to read your thoughts later on and see them as a dialogue between people who are not you, right? Past you, different people. And you get to see where you're being good to yourself and where you're being unfair with yourself. And then when you find that, oh shit, I have a pattern of being unfair with myself, then you can intervene. And one of my beliefs with regards to coercion is that people often fall into the trap of trying to punish the punisher, right? And then it just becomes this loop. So you have to just try to refuse to be coercive. I'll get into that. I'm gonna write a whole book about that, but ebook. But yeah, let me just keep going. So you might not explicitly say something like, you're such a terrible person if you don't do X, but when you investigate the behavior and you ask questions, you will find things that may surprise you, that may even shock and upset you. And I think that's a huge part of like growing up and becoming an adult and learning about yourself, right? So one of mine went like this, and I remember I first wrote about this around 2013 or so. I wrote that I want to be smart and I want to be perceived as smart. And so in my journal entry, I wrote, I want to be perceived as smart. To do that, I have to do these things. I have to write blog posts. I have to talk to people. Here are all the things I have to do to achieve my goal of wanting to be perceived as smart, right? And it didn't occur to me then to question, why do I want to be perceived as smart? And and there are a bunch of cool benefits to being smart. There's a bunch of like good reasons to be smart and to be perceived as smart. There are like positive things that you get out of it. But there's this whole dark side to it that I hadn't articulated, that was really what was, I think, governing my behavior or like shaping my behavior, which is that I believe that the world is cruel to people who are not smart. And at that point, I had participated in the cruelty towards people who are not smart or who don't seem smart. You don't have to go very far to find people mocking and shaming other people for being stupid. And I remember participating in that. And at some level, then I was motivated by fear. I was afraid that people would mock me for being stupid, including myself, and so a part of me was always living in fear, and that fear manifests in tension and stress and anxiety, and there's this self-loathing that emerges that, I have to work hard to avoid being mean to myself, and then there's a part of me that resents the other part of me that's going to be mean to myself. And this loop of self-loathing and self-resentment just it crushed it manifests as tension in the body, shoulders, face, and I was just, it makes you kind of on edge, and you lash out at people who upset you or don't, kind of. When I saw other people behaving in ways, and I find that, if I'm being honest, I still get bothered by when I see other people behaving in ways that I think are stupid. And, I don't necessarily think that's a stupid person, I should punish them. But it might be something like, hey dude, I used to get punished for being stupid and I want to protect you from being punished. But that protection mechanism it's from a place of neediness. It's from a place of fear and anxiety. And people can feel it. People can feel when you're like, hey dude, like why are you being this way? Hey dude, right? As opposed to just kind of being open, nourishing, chill, kind of good humor, and be like, hey, have you considered this? And it's a huge difference. It's subtle, but it's dramatic. Okay, and so I found that I have since been able to dismantle that particular assumption. I have decided that I'm gonna be kind to people who are not smart, including myself. And I do know that the world at large can still be unkind, and it is still a very cruel world we live in. True, that hasn't changed. But I don't have to participate in that. I don't have to be cruel to people. It's just that I don't have to be cruel to people, including myself. I can choose to not be cruel. Like, that itself is a really profound thing to sit with and realize I don't have to be a bitch. Like, when I say bitch, I mean I don't have to be an asshole. I don't have to be a kind of stand-in for the abuse that you're gonna get from other people. I can be different. And I don't have to pretend that the world is a kind, nourishing place for everyone. It's not. There's a lot of cruelty in the world. You will get bullied and abused by people outside my sphere of concern and control, right? And I don't wanna, I have other like riffs about safe spaces and coddling and nourishing. I don't believe in coddling people. but you can nourish people by supporting them without being mean and cruel to them, and you can tell them, you can kind of give them space to express themselves. And if you see something that is gonna be like, if you know that someone's probably gonna get bullied for something, you don't have to bring it up in an anxious way. You don't even have to bring it up at all, actually. Ultimately, it's not your responsibility to prepare everyone else around you for everything in the world, right? And there's some nuance in there that I don't think I want to get into in this video, but I can be kind. I can surround myself with other people who are kind. We can be gentle but firm. We can be honest but sensitive, right? And yeah, that's the end of my transcript. So I'm truly ad-libbing now. It's just I have found that my experience going through this journey, and as I have said, I'm not done. I haven't completely unlearned like fear of being bullied for being stupid. I have enough experience. I have enough life experience now that I know that no one's gonna bully me for being stupid. Like when I have a body of work, right? I have all my writing, I have all my friends. People know and that I'm a person who does the things that I do. I have a whole thread about how how to use dumb tweeting to precipitate smart writing. I understand that stuff pretty well. I appreciate the way in which like dumb questions and dumb ideas are a necessary part of the creative process. If you want to become smarter, you have to go through the valley of dumb, in a sense. So, it's like there's valleys and peaks, and you can't have just one without the other. And so I understand that. And even so, I do still have this kind of vestigial remnant of this old emotional meanings. There's a beautiful quote by one of my friends, Malcolm Ocean, who says that people are living all the time in a like almost like a dream mashup of their present circumstances and their past emotional realities. It's like having a dream where you are at school but you're also on a boat at the same time, but you don't realize it. Similarly, like people are constantly influenced by their old emotional meanings, and because it's just old habits, right? And so I have this old habit of being like, I have to protect my loved ones from being exposed as stupid at some level. Again, I feel silly saying that out loud because I don't think that's true. But when I examine my behavior, when I examine the feeling I get when I see someone being stupid on my watch, right? Like a friend kind of. Most recently, I think I saw a friend reply to someone else with something like, "Hey, you should check your DMs and reply to my message." And I'm like, that's not good reply game, man. Like, but I didn't, I the old me might have made that a big thing. I might have like replied to him in that moment publicly. And then that would have been me, it's like I do kind of care about helping him correct his mistake. It's not even really a mistake, it's just his style of communication. But I do think that he would respect my perspective on it as a person who has experience talking to lots of people. But even so, like if I replied publicly, part of it would be, it would be like me using my desire to improve, to protect a friend and improve him. And at the same time, that's me kind of drawing attention to it when most people might not have noticed. So I'm kind of like dunking on him and elevating myself as the authority. I'm the smart guy. Here's the dumb guy that needs assistance and help from me. It's needy, right? It's me kind of performing for everyone. Everyone, look, I'm this smart guy. I'm helping this dumb guy, right? But you get what I mean? Like the nature of the performance still kind of sets up this hierarchical frame, which I have come to believe is not psychologically, emotionally healthy. And yeah, so you can let that shit go. And I am in the process of letting that shit go, and I can feel, go and watch like some of my super old videos in like 2015 or so. You see I'm like my hands in my pockets, and I'm like just kind of like stiff and like it's depressing to look at even, right? And yeah, there's symptoms of like this zero-sum kind of mentality, and I am eager to make more progress and be done with that. And I guess you'll never be completely done. There's some amount of, you know, it's awareness, and you have to keep improving and keep learning, but you get better as you go, and so it does get less difficult. Anyway, we're at half an hour. I think that's about all I have to say for now in this video. And thanks for hanging out. Let me know if you have any questions, and let's hang out again in the comments section, potentially. Cheers, guys and girls. Done.